He hunted wolves for the government, but respected them more than most men respect themselves. He out-tracked Eskimos. He crossed frozen rivers solo. He took down bears, walked through blizzards, and called a dirt-floored cabin home for 13 winters. And somehow you've probably never heard his name. Frank Glaser was built for cold, for distance, for silence, for the kind of lonely, brutal country that kills soft men fast. Over 40 years, he walked the line between hunter and naturalist, killer and caretaker, myth and man. He understood the wild. And when the wolves howled, he listened. In this episode, we're telling his story. The kind of life you can't fake, and sure as hell can't repeat. My name is Sam, and this is Wild America. Now let's get into it. Chapter 1. The Great Escape. To Alaska, 1915. 26, single, done with normal, Frank Glaser walked out of Washington State with 2 duffels, a .306 Winchester, binoculars, and a hunger for chaos. In May 1915, he boarded the SS Mariposa to Alaska. He wasn't chasing gold or glory. He just wanted out. What he got was a frontier that hit back hard. Valdez greeted him with 25 feet of snow in Thompson Pass and a 371-mile death march to Fairbanks, part sludge pit, part ice trap, part murder alley. Locals didn't sugarcoat it. Too much snow in the pass, rivers got no bridges, and 2 men got killed in Copper Center last fall. Frank, however, wasn't intimidated. He partnered with an old sourdough, shoved his supplies into a rucksack, and hit the trail. The rest? Soft city chichacos hauling too much gear and wearing street shoes. Once the snow hit waist deep, they broke, feet sore, packs soaked, spirits crushed. Some quit. One guy, Knockout Solomon, cursed nonstop after his high-end boots chewed his toes into pulp. Frank, however, kept walking. Nights were brutal. Snow crusted just enough to fool you, then caved in. Waist-deep plunges, clawing out, repeat. By the time they hit Ptarmigan Drop Roadhouse, they looked half dead. "You'll never make it unless it crusts again tonight," the owner said. But Frank didn't wait. Waiting meant frostbite, or worse. Then came the rivers. No bridges, no boats. Just icy torrents cutting through the trail. You stripped, crossed, and hoped you didn't fall in. Sometimes you stood in snowmelt till your legs went numb, then stumbled through dragging your gear. Frank once soaked his bleeding feet in the freezing water, dried them, pulled on fresh socks, and kept moving. "That toughened me up," he said. Roadhouses came every 20 miles or so. Some were open, some were boarded tight. At Upper Tonsina, Frank got a bed and lice. His trail partner took one look and said, "You're lousy, Glaser." Should have checked the bed. After that, Frank chose stars over sheets. That sourdough of a partner peeled off to work a mine. And so, Frank went solo. He slept by day, hiked by night. He was always scanning for game, for shelter, for anything off. At Copper Center, he earned Musher's knee, that deep, grinding ache from dragging 60 pounds through mud. Locals had a fix. Stand in an icy stream till your legs go numb. Dry off, keep going. Savage, but it worked. Aside from testing your body, this merciless trail also messed with your head. Copper Center had its own stories. There, the McCrarys bred silver and black foxes, worth a fortune. Frank learned fast. Mess with a nesting vixen, she'll kill her own pups. He also heard about a triple murder from the fall. One guy's arm turned up in a sled dog's mouth. Another had 7.22s in his back. Farther up the trail, the snow turned to bog. Mosquitoes hit like they'd been starving for weeks. Frank picked up a bed net at a trading post. Might have been the smartest thing he ever bought. In Gulkana, he passed a signal corps shack where a lynx lounged on the desk and rode stray dogs like ponies. Tame Dall sheep climbed hay lofts. Foxes twitched in wire cages. Martin farms bloomed in the mud. Wild and civilized blurred into one weird mess. Then came sourdough. Not a person, a roadhouse. And not just any roadhouse. This one was run by swearing Molly. 6'2", sharp-tongued, didn't take crap from anyone. She cursed like a dock worker, cooked like a chef. When Frank showed up, she was mid-rant, chasing some poor guy out with a storm of insults. Then she looked at Frank like nothing happened. "You hungry? Come in, have some coffee." Her place was spotless, carpeted floors, curtained windows, warm fire. It was a magnet for traders, trappers, drifters, anyone with a story or scars. Molly ran the joint like a queen. Once she got sweet on a driver named Jack Bishop. He mailed her a fake gold nugget made of salt. She showed it off all summer, thought she'd struck it rich. But when the truth came out, she vowed revenge, then forgave him by spring. And that was Molly. Fire and grace, all wrapped up in boots. And when Frank left, the ground got worse. Spruce log roads turned to deep sucking mud. The trail climbed again, past Paxson Lake, past Summit Lake, both frozen solid in May. Somewhere along the ice, Frank met Bobby Sheldon, the first guy to drive from Fairbanks to Valdez. He was hacking at ice, trying to drag a busted Model T across it. Frank jumped in, swinging tools for hours. Bobby was a real pioneer, he'd say later. A miner named Matt McGovern, 52, joined him for a stretch. Decent guy, until he almost shot Frank while fiddling with a pistol. Then he remembered he'd left $400 in a vest back at Paxson's. Turned around, ran all the way back, came grinning with the cash like it was no big deal. They timed river crossings for noon before meltwater swelled. "Midnight hits, and those rivers'll kill you," Frank said. "One wrong step, and you're gone." He saw it happen later. Sheldon lost a whole Model T to a river and spent weeks pretending to pan gold out of the wreck. At Yost's Roadhouse, things turned gloomy. 12 people froze to death there one winter. Blizzards blinded travelers just yards from the door. The Army put up a fence and a bell that clanged in the wind, hoping it might save the next one. Frank also heard about stagecoach passengers dumped in a whiteout, crawling blind in the snow, while a Signal Corps sergeant dragged them in one at a time. And past Yost's, the wild bit back, grizzly tracks the size of snowshoes crossed the trail. Frank always kept his rifle loaded, close. Snowshoe hares bolted like sparks, tearing bark off willows like locusts. The rhythm out here was simple: eat, freeze, survive, repeat. By the time Frank limped into Fairbanks, he was wrecked, scarred from lice, feet shredded, eyes hollow. He'd walked nearly 400 miles through some of the nastiest terrain on the continent. Broke, beat up, tough as rawhide. But he'd made it. He was home. "I came to Alaska looking for game," he once said. "What I found was something wilder." Chapter 2, Market Hunter of the North, 1915 to 1924. Frank Glaser didn't hunt for sport. He hunted to eat. In Alaska, meat was currency, and cash meant staying alive. He limped into Fairbanks with sore feet and a hard stare, saw nothing but wild country, and went straight to work. He scouted the Alaska range, picked his grounds, and got busy. Shoot, butcher, haul, sell, repeat. From 1915 to 1924, Frank moved through the slopes near the Wildest trail like a shadow. Caribou, dall sheep, moose. He tracked them through silence, through storms, knew their patterns like a map burned into his head. He packed light, carried a rifle, and disappeared into the backcountry for days. When he returned, he hauled hundreds of pounds of meat, sometimes dragging it through snow, sometimes packing it over ridgelines on his back. He would sell it for 25 cents a pound. No show, no ego, just blood, cold, and the math of survival. One time, he dropped a moose cow deep in the woods, hauled the meat out solo, load by load, slept under spruce when skies were clear, huddled by warm rock when they weren't. No partner, no backup. I got used to it, he said. Didn't need anybody. I had the animals. Game was thick then and fearless. He once spotted dall sheep across a canyon. They didn't see him. He belly crawled a mile through frozen brush, picked one, dropped it. He then skinned it in the snow and packed it home. No thrill, just meat, money, and how long it'd last. Market hunting, after all, wasn't a job. Never was. It was always survival. And here, there were no roads, no shortcuts, just rough trails, steep climbs, deep creeks. 1 minute, sun. Next, blizzard. Once a storm pinned him down. He crawled under spruce boughs, a moose carcass just yards away. Wind howled like a banshee. He curled up in his bag and hoped the bears didn't hear. Too cold to worry, he said. Too cold to move. Food ran thin, often. He shot ptarmigan when he could, boiled bones and scraps when he couldn't. Dug roots, picked bulbs, ate what the land offered. I didn't waste nothing, he said. If I killed it, I used it. Frank didn't chase trophies either. Didn't care about antlers unless they meant extra cash. I never shot cows if I could help it, he said. Same with ewes. Took bulls, took rams, left the breeders. Not for ethics, for logic. Frank hunted where the ground tried to kill you. Loose rock, ice-covered logs, steep slopes. Rivers like the Delta and Little Talk? Not cold, deadly. And in spring, they rose fast. One crossing, he lost half a moose. Pack slipped, meat gone. Damn shame, he said. That was good meat. His rifle was part of him. Even in his 60s, he wore no glasses. He could spot fur on a ridge. One guy said, when Frank raised that rifle, something dropped. Every time, winter was dead quiet. Snow muffled steps. Wind whispered. No voices for weeks. Frank liked that. I never got lonesome, he told Jim Reardon. I had my rifle. I had work to do. He packed meat to roadhouses and camps, anywhere that paid. You've seen this kind of grind in our other frontier stories. Same stakes, same struggle. Stories like this are all over the channel, so swing by when you're done with this one. Anyhow, out there, wild meat kept you alive. A quarter a pound mattered. I could pack 100 pounds easy, Frank said. Did it all the time. His journal didn't ramble, just facts, clipped and direct. Shot 2 moose, packed 1 down, too much snow for dogs, slept rough, snowed all night. Another entry. Wind bad, nearly lost sled, killed 1 caribou. Feet froze. There was no room for mistakes. Twist a knee? You're stuck? No food? You starve. But Frank didn't slow down. He kept moving, tracking, hauling, hustling meat through deep snow and dead silence just to earn a buck. No rangers, no safety net. Just you, your rifle, and whatever you could carry out. Frank spoke the wild's language, moved through it like he belonged. Game's smarter than you think, he said once. You gotta outthink it, outwalk it, outfreeze it if that's what it takes. That was the job. And so before he was the wolf man, Frank was a meat man. and in that part of Alaska, that was more than enough. Chapter 3. The Cabin and the Wolfman, Savage River Era, 1924 to 1937. Frank built his Savage River cabin in 10 days. No crew, no plans, just an axe, muscle, and a brain made for being alone. Sod roof, dirt floor, mud-sealed logs, ugly, but warm. It was his. It sat deep in the Alaska range. No roads, no people, just how he liked it. By 1924, he was done with towns. Savage River gave him space, game, and peace. He stayed 13 years. Winters could freeze your lungs. But he didn't care. He thrived. No neighbors, just wind and wolves. Wolves whose howls echoed through the valleys. Frank listened, watched, tracked them for years, learned how they hunted. Killers, he said, but smart, deserved respect. The cabin was his HQ. From there, he trapped, hunted, and hiked blind through blizzards. No compass, just instinct. I always knew where I was, he said. Could read the country like a book. His journal was all business. Snowed all night, cut firewood. Wolf tracks near trapline. But between the lines, life was rough. When food ran low, he boiled spruce bark. He skinned frozen kills by lantern light. He dried boots by the stove. He always kept his rifle loaded, not for wolves, but grizzlies. Spring brought them in close. One entry read, "Had a hell of a time crossing river." That's all he wrote. But years later, he told the full story. Swept into an ice-choked current, rifle under one arm, pack soaked, boots dragging like anchors. He clawed his way to shore, half frozen, but alive. And Glaser didn't just live near wolves, he raised them. Sort of. Each spring he'd find dens, snatch a few pups, and raise them alongside his sled dogs. The result? A team of half-wild, all-muscle hybrids he called wolf dogs. Tough, unruly, and loyal as hell. They'd fight like devils, he said, but run like hell when you hooked 'em up. He fed them caribou scraps, watched how they moved, named them Kenai, Queenie. They were workers, partners, not pets, a piece of the wild, leashed but never tamed. And inside the cabin, Frank turned field biologist. He tracked prints, studied scat, took notes, sketched. By the mid-1930s, Frank Glaser dug deeper into wolf study. Alone in his Savage River cabin, something changed. He studied how they hunted, how they took out the weak, old, or slow. People say they kill for fun, he wrote. Not true. They kill to live, and they're better at it than most men. They used their heads, he said. Didn't rush, waited, worked together. He saw the dark side, too. Wolves turned on their own. One mistake, and you're out or dead. They're cold like that, Frank said. No second chances. He took notes on everything. Kills, tracks, scat, even how high they peed on trees. Even biologists came to him with questions. Adolph Murray used his notes in The Wolves of Mount McKinley. Even government guys treated him like a field guide in boots. He knew wolves top to bottom, said trapper Oscar Vogel. Taught me tricks I'd never thought of. And the twist? The more Frank learned, the less he hated them. He still trapped, still poisoned, but he saw the point. Eliminating wolves? Frank hated that idea, said fellow agent Jim King. It wasn't about wiping them out, it was about balance. By his 50s, folks just called him the Wolf Man. A letter with just that name still reached him in Fairbanks. He didn't pick the nickname, but it fit. He could track a wolf like it was his brother. He knew where they slept, crossed rivers, and chewed bones in the sun. Frank wasn't soft, but he was fair. Wolves, he said, were survivors. And in Alaska, that was smart. Yet Savage River wasn't just blood and biology. It was isolation, deep and harsh. Frank could go months without seeing another soul. Snow buried his cabin. Temps dropped past 50 below. Firewood ran low. Frostbite took pieces of him. Yet he never whined. "I had what I needed," he said. "Meat, water, quiet. What else is there?" Sometimes, midwinter, he swore he heard voices. Once, a grizzly raided his meat stash, left no tracks. "Must have been a ghost," he said. Maybe joking, maybe not. After all, up there, logic didn't always apply. In the end, that cabin was a forge. It hardened him. Chapter 4. Uncle Sam's Apex Predator, Government Wolf Hunter, 1937 to 1955. In 1937, Frank Glaser swapped traps for a government badge. His new job? Kill wolves. No limits. No paperwork. Just results. He worked solo. No clock, no boss. Just wild open Alaska. One week he was in the White Mountains with snowshoes and a rifle. Next week, crawling across frozen tundra, tracking paw prints through silence. Frank was happiest 100 miles from anyone, knee-deep in snow, chasing wolves, one agent said. And that's exactly what he did. Spring, he dug out dens. Winter, he set snares. Fall, he laid poison. Once aerial hunting was allowed, he took to the skies. A spotter flew low. Frank leaned out with a scoped point, 220 Swift, or landed, and stalked them on foot. "One shot," he said. "Miss, they're gone. Hit, you've got meat." He mastered the getter, a cyanide trap disguised as bait. One sniff, and the wolf dropped. He logged every detail. How many, where, when, even the weather. In some areas, his notes were the only official records. But forms didn't make him deadly. Instinct did. He could read a single hair on snow like a detective. As mentioned earlier, Frank knew the ridge they'd use, the creek they'd cross, where the alpha would mark. Frank could look at grass and tell you what wolves were thinking, one agent said. Locals called him Amagook Frank, which translates to Wolf Frank. He simply beat them at their own game. When wolves tore through reindeer herds, Frank shut it down. His traps worked, his poison sets were quick and clean. And in 1948, he was sent to Nunivak Island to protect muskox. Locals there had been killing them. Yet Frank didn't scold. He simply talked. After that, the killing stopped. "They listened," a pilot said. He was straight. Frank never sugar-coated it. Wolves breed fast. Traps alone won't cut it. "You need poison, planes, den work, the whole deal," he said. "Hit hard, don't stop." But he still respected them. Long before tech and trackers, he was out there with binoculars, watching packs cross frozen rivers, mapping their moves, the alphas lead, the flanks, the way they herded caribou like soldiers on a raid. "I don't mind shooting wolves," he wrote to the Game Commission, "but when I find one in my trap, I feel ashamed. They're the real gentlemen of the predatory family." It was pure survival, not contradiction. Glaser respected wolves but killed them anyway. Called himself a conservationist, yet joined predator control. Raised wolf dogs, shot wild ones. Loved their cunning, hated what they did to the herds. "You got to keep the balance," he said. "Too many wolves, and you got no game." And his bosses trusted him completely. No room for soft feelings when you're paid to kill wolves. One of his bosses said, "As long as I'm director, you've got a job." they'd let him disappear for weeks. And he always came back with pelts and data. Frank would file his report, then get antsy to head back out, said one biologist. Didn't matter how cold it got, that's when he felt most alive. He rode with scientists and made them look lost. One professor watched Frank read the land like a book. He was like an Indian, the man said. He knew every bump. With Frank, town life didn't stick, never did. He kept a room at the Nordale Hotel and boarded his wolf dogs nearby, but he was rarely around. And whenever he was in town, he talked nonstop. All day, breakfast to patrol, one partner said. But his stories moved. They had rhythm. Still, the land had teeth. A few years later, moose exploded. Old-timers said they'd never seen so many, one agent said. Then Frank left. Wolves came back, moose vanished. Locals still say, "We need another Glaser." He never wanted fame or thanks. He just did the job, quiet and unrelenting. And when Alaska became a state in 1959, the policy changed. Frank didn't fight it, however. He simply stepped aside. Now he may have never hesitated to kill, but he never forgot what he was killing. Another predator. Chapter 5. The Legend Lives On. Frank Glaser died in 1974, but in Alaska, he never really left. His name still rides the wind, hooked onto wolf howls. His stories thunder across bar tops, slip through trapline cabins, and rumble out of old-timers' mouths when they talk about how things used to be. Yes, the man's gone, but the myth? It's still kicking. Even before he went quiet, the tales had legs. One version says, in 1938, he rolled a government car 3 times down the Stees Highway, crawled out with cracked ribs and a scowl. His diary just said, rolled over 3 times, cut on head, rib injuries. Dry as sawdust. No drama. Anyone else would have died, or at least milked it for sympathy. Then there were the pets. Wolf dogs with steel-trap jaws and glacier eyes. One massive black wolf chained in a cabin let Frank stroll in with food like it was normal. Sam White, a hardened trapper, said, "I wouldn't have gone near it unless it was trussed in chains." Frank didn't exactly tame these animals. He simply earned their tolerance, maybe even their trust. Then there's the bison hunt story. Frank, in his 60s, tags along with a college professor who'd never aimed at anything more dangerous than a thought. Frank tracks the bull, lines up the shot, and hands it off. 2 shots ring out. One hits the chest, one clips the ear, Frank's ear. The bull drops. No one asked who made the kill. They knew. Bush pilots would often drop him in the Arctic with nothing but snowshoes and a rifle. 2 weeks later, he'd radio back with a sack full of wolf tails and a craving for meat. Jim King remembered how Frank couldn't stand office work. By day 3, he'd get itchy. Wolves needed thinning. He'd be gone. In Fairbanks, he stalked the streets like a wolf behind glass. People knew him. He boarded his wolf dogs nearby, kept a room at the Nordale Hotel, and bought every new rifle in town. He even slipped cash to broke trappers who couldn't cover their bar tabs. Even when he had money, he lived lean. Even when alone, he didn't seem lonely. He chewed snuff, quit it in the hospital, cursed it after, then picked it back up like nothing changed. His boots stayed laced, rifles spotless. Eyes sharp into his 60s, never wore glasses. He moved like a man shaped by snow, sleds, and survival. When he talked, it came out in stored-up bursts, like he'd been holding it in for years. To the old-timers, Frank was legend attached to memory. Governor J. Hammond called him Lobo Lean, with gun-bore eyes and a gait like a penned-up predator. Joked he might have been part wolf himself. Always prowling, always alert, always one step from slipping into the wild again. Today, Alaska's changed. You can now fly over the trails he hiked for weeks. Roads cut across the ground he wore thin on foot. Tourists chase northern lights with phones. Bears show up on YouTube, not in meat caches. But Frank's still out there, more than a memory, not quite a ghost. He's in the wind, in the tracks, in the way the land feels when it's still. He left no kids, no estate, just Alaska, untamed, scarred, and humming with stories. Stories about the wolf man who tracked better than scientists, walked farther than bush pilots, and loved the animal he hunted more deeply than any textbook ever could. Yes, Frank Glaser is gone. But try walking the Alaska Range on a quiet winter morning. See the wolf tracks in the snow. Then tell me he's not there. In the end, they may have called him Wolfman, but he was just a man who understood the wild better than most of us understand ourselves. They called him Death Wind, a shadow in the trees, a ghost with a rifle. He moved without a sound, struck without mercy, and vanished before his enemies even knew he was there. On the lawless frontier, where every step could be your last, Louis Wetzel's name spread like wildfire, feared by those who crossed him, honored by those who stood behind him. He was a frontiersman, a scout, a man who knew the wilderness as well as he knew war. But was he a protector of his people, or a man consumed by bloodlust? A warrior? A killer? A legend? Or something else entirely? And where does a legend like this begin? My name is Sam, and this is Wild America. Born in 1763, Louis Wetzel moved with his family to Western Virginia in 1770, where native raids were part of daily life. At 14, he learned what it meant to be hunted. Watching his younger brother play outside, he spotted a gun barrel near the corn crib. He moved too late. The shot ripped into his chest, and two warriors dragged him and Jacob away. No one saw them go. This was his first time tasting death. For 2 days they marched west. Wetzel bled but stayed quiet. Slow prisoners didn't last long. That night the warriors made a mistake. They didn't tie the boys down. Wetzel waited, listened, then slipped into the dark with Jacob. But bare feet wouldn't take them far. So he went back. He stole moccasins, then a rifle. Then he ran. The warriors were fast. But by dawn, they were closing in. Wetzel played the game, misleading, doubling back, vanishing into the brush. But they didn't quit. By midday, they were nearly on them again. At the Ohio River, the boys lashed logs together, crossed, and stumbled onto safe ground. They had won. But Wetzel's war had just begun. The frontier was more than home, it was his hunting ground. He read the land like a book, knew the rivers, the trees, the wind. But beauty meant nothing when death was waiting right around the corner. And nowhere was safe. During the American War of Independence, after Crawford's defeat in 1782, a rattled Thomas Mills returned to Wheeling with a story. He had abandoned his horse at Native Spring 9 miles away and wanted it back. Wetzel warned him, too dangerous. Mills didn't listen. They went anyway. When Wetzel saw the horse tied to a tree, he knew. A trap. Mills stepped forward. A rifle cracked. Mills dropped. The woods exploded with war cries. Wetzel ran. 4 warriors chased him, sure he was finished. They were wrong. Half a mile in, the fastest caught up, his tomahawk raised. Wetzel spun, fired, and the man crumpled. Without slowing, he reloaded on the run. Another grabbed for his rifle. They hit the ground hard. The warrior was strong, nearly tearing the gun away. Wetzel twisted, jammed the barrel under his chin, and fired. 2 down. The last pair hesitated. Wetzel slowed, daring them forward. One ducked behind a tree, not wide enough. Wetzel's rifle cracked. The man staggered, bleeding. The last warrior turned and ran, screaming, "No chase that man! Him gun always loaded!" They learned what many had before. Wetzel was never easy prey. By summer 1786, the frontier burned. A settler had been killed at Mingo Bottom. Retaliation came swift. Major McMahon called for men, 100 for the first native scalp. To some, a fortune. To Wetzel, irrelevant. He wasn't in it for the money. On August 5th, they crossed the Ohio, pushing toward the Muskingum. 5 scouts moved ahead and found the enemy camp. Too many warriors, no chance of victory. The decision was clear: retreat. Wetzel didn't move. Sitting on a log, rifle across his knees, he spoke without looking up. "I came to hunt natives. Now that I've found them, I'm not going home sucking my thumb. I'm taking a scalp, or I'm losing my own." The others left him there, alone, surrounded by men who wanted nothing more than to see him fall. He didn't care. His only friend was his rifle, his only guide, the stars. As darkness fell, he moved carefully, sticking to deep woods, avoiding war parties. No fire. He made do, burying dry bark under dirt, letting it smolder beneath him for warmth. No smoke, no light, no sign a man was there. The next evening he found them, 2 warriors, camp set, unaware they were being watched. Wetzel melted into the brush and waited. At sunset, one returned, stoked the fire, and ate. The other arrived soon after. They laughed, talked, sang, completely at ease. They didn't know Wetzel was 20 feet away, crouched in the dark. Around midnight, one stood, grabbed his rifle, and disappeared into the trees, carrying a chunk of fire, probably heading for a deer lick, the smoke keeping mosquitoes off. Wetzel wasn't too happy about that. This wasn't the plan. He had them both right there. Now one had slipped away. He waited, hoping the man would return, but as dawn neared, Wetzel knew he couldn't wait. He moved in. The remaining native was curled on his side, deep in sleep. Wetzel struck the native, ending him in an instant. A single jolt, a final breath, then silence. He left his mark, wiped his blade clean, and vanished before the sun broke the horizon. By the time he reached Mingo Bottom, his companions had already returned. But Wetzel came back with a scalp. The kill was his, and so was the reward. The frontier had 1,000 tricks, and Wetzel knew them all. One of the deadliest was the turkey call. More than once, men had disappeared after hearing a lone turkey cry from the woods. Wetzel had his suspicions, natives using the call as bait. He set out to prove it. East of the creek, 60 feet above the water, was a cave nearly hidden by vines. From inside, a man could see across the hills, a perfect ambush point. Wetzel crept up and inspected the site. Exactly what he expected. This was where the hunters had lured their prey, where men disappeared without a sound. A blind. A graveyard in waiting. The frontier had its killers. Wetzel was just better at it than most. Wetzel knew the cave, knew exactly where to find it. Before dawn, he slipped through the brush, circling wide to approach from the rear. He picked his spot, a clear view of the entrance, hidden in the shadows. And then he waited. Minutes passed. Then a warrior's head rose from the cave's mouth, eyes scanning the trees. He let out a sharp cry, a signal. Wetzel's rifle was already up. One smooth trigger pull. The shot cracked through the forest. The warrior dropped instantly, his body collapsing against the rock behind him. That turkey wouldn't be calling anymore. Whether others used the cave again, no one knows. But Wetzel had made his point. Every fall he made his own kind of hunt, deep into enemy territory, alone, armed, and looking for trouble. This time he pushed to the Muskingum and found it. A small native camp, 4 warriors fast asleep around a dying fire. He crouched in the darkness, 4 to 1, tough but not impossible. Midnight came. A wolf howled in the distance. Then, like a shadow, Wetzel moved, rifle in one hand, tomahawk in the other. He set the rifle against a tree, drew his knife, and stepped forward. Silent, cold, lethal. His blade struck true. The first man never even made a sound before collapsing. A second step, a second stroke. Another fell without waking. The third barely had time to gasp before Wetzel's blade silenced him. The fourth, he ran. Wetzel gave chase, but the darkness swallowed the man whole. No matter. He returned to the camp, gathered his trophies, and started the long trek home. When he got back, someone asked if he had any luck. "Not much," he replied. "Treed 4 natives. 1 got away. 70 miles out, 70 miles back, just another day's work." Another time, caught in a storm near Wheeling, Wetzel took shelter in an abandoned cabin. He climbed into the loft, gathered a few broken boards for a bed, and settled in. Then, movement. 6 natives. They entered, lit a fire, and started cooking. Wetzel, knife in hand, didn't move. If they spotted him, he had one chance: drop in the middle of them and fight his way out. He steadied his breath, but they never looked up. One by one, they finished eating and stretched out by the fire. Soon their breathing deepened. Wetzel didn't hesitate. He crawled from the loft, slipping into the shadows. He pressed himself against the logs near the door, fingers tight around his blade. Now it was his turn to hunt. At dawn, a native stepped outside, stretching in the cool air. He never saw it coming. Wetzel's rifle cracked. The warrior crumpled, the morning silence broken. By the time the sound faded, Wetzel was gone, slipping into the wild. At age 25, he tried soldiering under General Harmar in Marietta, Ohio. It didn't suit him. Rules, discipline, none of it fit. He left for Wheeling but returned as a scout. That's when everything changed. Among the visiting natives was a warrior named George Washington, respected, trusted, untouchable. Harmar wanted peace. Wetzel didn't care. He shot the man dead. The outrage was instant. Harmar had him arrested and locked in irons. Wetzel didn't deny it. When questioned, he offered a solution. "Turn me over to the natives. Put their best warriors in a circle. Let them have tomahawks. I'll take one too. Let's see who walks away." Harmar refused. This wasn't the frontier. This was the army. The law would decide his fate. Days passed. Wetzel paced like a caged animal. He sent another message. "I can't live like this. Let me walk." Harmar relented. His feet were freed, but his hands stayed shackled. He was allowed to walk the grounds, always under guard. That was all he needed. At first he played dumb, darting a few steps, laughing, stopping. He pushed farther each time. Then, in a blur of raw speed, he was gone. The guards hesitated, then fired. Too late. He was already in the trees. They chased him, but they never had a chance. He knew the land. They didn't. Wetzel ran 2 miles before plunging into a thicket, squeezing beneath a fallen tree. He lay still. The hunt was on. Soldiers and native scouts swept the forest. Hours passed. Then, footsteps. 2 warriors climbed onto the very log hiding him. Wetzel's heart pounded. They howled for others, searching, but never looked close enough. As night fell, they moved on. Now came the real challenge. The Ohio River stood between him and safety. The banks were swarming with guards. His only hope was a friend's cabin on the Virginia side. No raft, no boat, just open water and iron shackles. Could he make it? Maybe, maybe not, but he'd rather drown than go back. So he jumped. The current dragged at him, but he kicked hard, floating on his back, inching across. By the time he crawled onto the Virginia shore, he collapsed, barely able to move. Eventually, he made his way to his friend's cabin. A hammer and file freed him from the irons. He was safe. For now. But Harmar wasn't finished. Furious over Wetzel's escape, he sent men in a canoe to drag him back, but Wetzel and his allies were waiting. As the boat neared shore, rifles leveled from the bank. The warning was simple. Step out, and you die. Harmar's men thought it over. Then they turned around. With fresh weapons and supplies, Wetzel headed home, but the price on his head kept climbing. Captain Kingsbury was next to try. He moved in on Mingo Bottom, expecting an easy capture. He was dead wrong. One eyewitness put it best. A company of men could as easily have dragged Old Horny out of the bottomless pit as taken Lewis Wetzel by force from Mingo Bottom. Kingsbury made his move while a shooting match was underway at Wetzel's father's place. The settlers were in no mood for legal niceties. Talk of hanging a man for killing a native had them ready to spill blood. The plan was simple: ambush Kingsbury's boat and leave no survivors. It took Major McMahon to stop them. He warned Kingsbury straight, try to take Wetzel, and he'd have every settler in the region gunning for him. Kingsbury got the message and turned back. Wetzel figured that was the end of it. He was wrong. Downriver in Maysville, Kentucky, he was drinking in a tavern when trouble found him. A lieutenant named Lawler, passing through with soldiers, spotted him. Unlike Kingsbury, Lawler didn't bother with threats. He rounded up his men, stormed the tavern, and threw Wetzel in irons. No trial, no warning, just cold steel and a hard shove onto a boat. By nightfall, Wetzel sat in a Fort Washington cell, bound hand and foot like a common criminal. The news hit the frontier like a lightning strike. Captured for killing a native? Outrage exploded. Every settlement along the Ohio bristled with loaded rifles. Petitions poured in, but when Harmar ignored them, men started forming militias. They weren't asking anymore. They were preparing to take Wetzel back. Harmar saw the writing on the wall. He wasn't about to start a war over one man. Wetzel walked free. He returned a hero. The settlers treated him like a king, his list of kills proof of his courage. The persecution only made him more beloved. As for Harmar, his reputation never recovered. The man who once commanded fear now inspired nothing but contempt. He had tried and failed to leash death wind. No one ever tried again. If Harmar had even half of Wetzel's nerve, his men might not have been slaughtered in the Miami campaign. But Wetzel didn't waste time on failures, his own or anyone else's. Not long after Kentucky, he set out for Dunkard Creek with a relative hunting along the way. The journey was easy until they arrived. The homestead was gone, burned to the ground. Wetzel crouched, scanning the ground. The signs were clear: 3 natives, 1 white man, and a captive. The captive was the young man's fiancée. He was ready to charge into the woods, but Wetzel caught his arm. If they're heading for the river, we cut them off. The raiders had tried to hide their trail, but Wetzel wasn't just tracking. He was thinking like them. He knew their route, knew they'd make for the Ohio fast. Instead of following footprints, he angled for the crossing point. They pushed hard, eating on the move. By nightfall, thick clouds choked the moon, forcing them to wait. At dawn, they picked up the chase, coming off a ridge into untouched valley land. Then, in the soft earth, they found what they needed: tracks. Among them, a small shoe print. The young man stiffened. "That's hers," he said. They followed persistently, over hills and streams, the trail barely visible, but never lost. By sunset, they reached the Ohio. Across the water, firelight blinked. The girl was still alive. That was all Wetzel needed. They swam across, silent. The young man wanted to rush in, but Wetzel stopped him. "We wait for daylight," he instructed. At dawn, the camp stirred. Wetzel gave the order. "You take the white one. I'll take a native." 2 shots cracked. 2 bodies fell. The young man ran to free the girl while Wetzel reloaded, eyes on the woods. 2 natives fled. He needed to know if more waited. He fired once, high into the trees. The warriors sprang out, screaming, tomahawks raised. They thought they had him. Wetzel didn't run. He didn't flinch. He just reloaded. One was nearly on him when he spun, fired. The warrior slipped and dropped. The second came harder, thinking Wetzel was done. Wetzel moved fast, ducking between trees, his hands smooth and practiced. When his rifle was ready, he stopped, turned, fired. The last warrior fell. And just like that, it was over. Not long after, Wetzel vanished south, taking a flatboat to New Orleans. Months passed without word. Then news came. He was in prison, shackled. A felon? Some said counterfeiting, others a Spaniard's wife. The truth never surfaced, but it didn't matter. No trial, no justice, just chains and 2 years in a cell. When the U.S. government finally stepped in, he was released and then sent north through Philadelphia. He then made his way home, but the man who returned wasn't the same. The time in chains had changed him. Leaner, harder, his anger sharpened to a fine edge. He spent just 2 nights on Wheeling Creek, one with his mother, another at Captain Bonnet's. He spoke of the humiliation, the injustice. But what ate at him most was betrayal. Someone had given him up. He swore revenge. In Wheeling, he stayed with George Cook, a relative. Mrs. Cook teased him about marriage. Wetzel only shook his head. "No woman in this world for me," he said. "Maybe one in heaven." Then, without a word, he was gone. South again. No one knew what happened next. Did he find the man who'd wronged him? Did he settle the score? History doesn't say. But one thing was certain. Wetzel was still the same man. Restless. Hunting. Deadly. However, even the best hunters slip. North of the Ohio River, after a long hunt, he let his guard down. A flicker of movement, a native raising a rifle. Both men dived behind trees, staring each other down. An hour passed. Neither moved. Wetzel had no patience for waiting. He fixed his buckskin cap to the end of his ramrod, easing it out just enough to mimic the peak of a head. The trap was set. A crack split the silence, the bullet tearing through the cap. Before the native could reload, Wetzel charged. His rifle roared, dropping the man where he stood. Another hunt, another kill. This time his name spread far beyond Wheeling. He was a frontiersman, a survivalist, a scout, a man you wanted when the woods turned hostile. Land speculators hired him as a bodyguard, unwilling to risk native country alone. One of them was John Madison, brother of future President James Madison. Madison needed a guide through the Kanawha, deep and dangerous land. Wetzel took the job. All went well until they found an abandoned camp, blankets, tools, supplies left behind in a hurry. They took what they needed and moved on. That afternoon, crossing the Little Kanawha River, gunfire erupted. A hidden war party ambushed them. Wetzel hit the ground fast. Madison wasn't so lucky. A bullet found him, and he went down. Wetzel didn't wait to die beside him. He disappeared into the trees. In Kentucky, too, his name carried weight. General George Rogers Clark, the man who had taken Kaskaskia and Vincennes, wanted him for a new expedition. Meriwether Lewis, of Lewis and Clark fame, was involved. They needed a man who knew the wild. A messenger rode out to find him. Wetzel wasn't interested in glory, but eventually he agreed. For 3 months he traveled with them through unknown lands, pushing the edge of the frontier. Then, as suddenly as he joined, he changed his mind. Without a word, he turned around and went home. Louis Wetzel never stayed put for long. One day he took a flatboat downriver and never returned. Some say he died in the wild. Others believe he vanished into the west, living out his last days far from the settlements that once depended on him. What's certain is that when Death Wind disappeared, the frontier lost one of its deadliest shadows. By 1808, however, Wetzel had drifted into Mississippi, staying with a relative near Natchez. That's where the official story ends, dead of fever, buried in an unmarked grave. But Wetzel was never the type to go quietly. If you ever laid eyes on him, you wouldn't forget. Dark skin, jet-black eyes that burned like embers, and a wild stare that could unnerve even the toughest warrior. His thick raven-black hair ran past his knees when let loose, a trophy the natives would have given a dozen warriors to claim. For all his reputation, Wetzel wasn't just edge and steel. He was blunt, rough, and kept to himself, but with friends he was fiercely loyal. If he called you a friend, you had nothing to fear. If he called you an enemy, you wouldn't have long to regret it. Officially, Wetzel died in Natchez. His bones were later dug up in 1942 and moved to West Virginia. But some say history got it wrong. Author Alan Eckert believed he lived much longer, settling along the Brazos River in Texas with a Spanish wife, maybe someone else's wife. If true, he didn't die in 1808, but in 1839, far from the frontier he once ruled. Yet whether he died at 23 or slipped away to Texas, his name was already legend. His brothers carried on his war, hunting natives without mercy. In villages, Wetzel was a name spoken in whispers, feared, hated, never forgotten. To the tribes, they weren't men. They were executioners. Did he cheat history one last time? We'll never know. The history books barely mention him now. Too violent, too messy. He doesn't fit the cleaned-up version of the past we're told to believe. But the frontier wasn't clean. It was brutal, bloody, and unforgiving. And Wetzel was a product of that world. To the Shawnee, he was Death Wind, fast, silent, and merciless. To the settlers, he was a protector. To others, a killer, no better than the warriors he hunted. But love him or hate him, his name still rides the wind. Out in the American wilderness, there were no maps, no roads, no backup, just 2 men, a hand-picked crew, and 8,000 miles of unforgiving wilderness. The Lewis and Clark expedition was a gamble with death. They faced flash floods, freezing mountains, grizzly bears, and near starvation. The rivers tried to drown them. The Rockies tried to break them. Even friendly tribes could turn deadly with one wrong move. But somehow, against all odds, they made it. Not because they were lucky, but because they were stubborn, smart, and knew when to trust the right people. Today, we're retracing that insane expedition, the risks they took, the mistakes they made, and the harsh lessons they learned along the way. This is the real story. The most dangerous expedition in American history. My name is Sam, and this is Wild America. Now, let's start with how the whole insane mission began. Chapter 1. Jefferson's Wild Idea. In the early 19th century, America was young, hungry, restless. And President Jefferson, he had plans. Big plans. He wasn't simply dreaming of bigger borders. No, he wanted to know what was out there. Beyond the Mississippi, beyond the edge of every map, a wild sweep of land full of mystery, danger, and promise. Indeed, long before he bought the Louisiana Territory, Jefferson had his eye on the unknown West. He wanted trade routes, open rivers, native alliances, maybe even a shortcut to Asia. But above all, he wanted America to beat Europe to the punch, plant the flag before anyone else did. As written in his letter, the commerce on that line could bear no competition with that of the Missouri, traversing a moderate climate, offering, according to the best accounts, a continued navigation from its source, and possibly with a single portage from the Western Ocean, and finding to the Atlantic a choice of channels through the Illinois or Wabash, the Lakes and Hudson through the Ohio and Susquehanna, or Potomac or James rivers, and through the Tennessee and Savannah rivers. So on January 18, 1803, behind closed doors, he sent a secret message to Congress. He asked for $2,500, a small fortune back then, to send a handful of men all the way to the Pacific Ocean. Not an army, just smart, capable men who could move fast, observe everything, and survive whatever the wilderness threw at them. But the plan needed a leader. Someone who could handle pressure, read terrain, speak with tribes, and keep men alive in places no white man had ever seen. And Jefferson had just the man. His own secretary, Captain Meriwether Lewis. He was a quiet man, sharp, military-trained, Virginian-born and frontier-bred. He knew discipline, he knew danger, he understood native customs and wasn't afraid to get dirty. And so Jefferson didn't just hand him a map and wish him luck. No, he prepped him. Hard. He gave Lewis full access to Monticello's massive library, books on geography, plants, minerals, animals, stars, survival, and the art of finding your way with nothing but the sky. Lewis soaked it all in. Every fact, every map, every scrap of knowledge. Because out there, past the last settlement, knowing the difference between edible and deadly, between friend and foe, between safe ground and a slow death. That was everything. And so the mission was set. The West was waiting. And the most dangerous expedition in American history was about to begin. But Lewis knew one man couldn't do it alone, at least not out there, not for this. So he picked a partner, William Clark, former superior, trusted friend, cool under pressure, smart with a compass, knew how to read the land like a book. Officially, Clark was just a second lieutenant, but Lewis didn't care, called him captain anyway. They led as equals, side by side, through every mile of hell ahead. And next came the core of discovery. Lewis and Clark needed the tough ones, men who could shoot, hunt, track, and fight. Survivors. Most were young, unmarried, and used to living hard. Clark handled most of the recruiting. He pulled in a wild mix: frontiersmen, army grunts, backwoods loners. Even his own enslaved man, York, came along. Strong, capable, and later a key figure with native tribes. He helped shape the mission's success. And that first winter, 1803 into 04, they set up Camp Dubois, right near where the Mississippi meets the Missouri. It was cold, muddy, and pitiless, but perfect for drilling the men, toughening them up, and stockpiling gear. And while Clark whipped the crew into shape, Lewis hit Philadelphia. There, he trained with top scientists, learning everything he could, how to map rivers, catalog plants, spot minerals, track stars. Jefferson had laid it all out in his orders. Follow the Missouri. Chart every branch. Find the best water route to the Pacific. Record everything, plants, animals, tribes, land. And make sure America, not Europe, was first to set foot and stake claims. Then finally it began. May 14th, 1804. They pushed off from Camp Dubois, oars biting into the Missouri. Slow going, no roads, no backup, just raw land ahead, spreading out into the unknown. And what they were about to face would test every ounce of grit they had. Chapter 2. The Land Hates You. The land was cruel. No roads, no maps, just untamed wild stretching for thousands of miles. And Lewis and Clark had to cross it all, one grueling mile at a time. First up, the Missouri River. It looked calm in places, but it lied. The current was merciless, always fighting you. The men rowed day after day upstream against a force that never let up. Sandbars shifted underfoot. Tree limbs, half rotted and waterlogged, skulked beneath the surface, ready to gut a boat in seconds. They called them snags and sawyers, hidden killers. Worse, the riverbanks were made of soft, unstable soil. 1 minute solid ground, the next, a landslide. Whole trees ripped loose and crashed into the current without warning. In one stretch, the current was so fierce, oars were useless. As for sails, forget it. The men had to rope the boats and drag them by hand, slogging through muck, slipping along crumbling banks. And that was just the river. Then came the mountains. Real mountains. Not the gentle hills they knew back east, but the soaring Rockies and the harsh Bitterroots. Crossing them was a death march, not a detour. The Lolo Trail snaked through the Bitterroot Range like some cursed game trail. Steep climbs, steeper drops, no clean water, no shelter, no food. The forest was thick and dark. Game vanished. The men burned thousands of calories climbing ridge after ridge and had nothing but roots and dried meat to show for it. Starvation crept in. Feet blistered, spirits cracked, but they kept going. They had no choice. Clark summed it up in one line: high rugged mountains in every direction. That's what they were up against. And just when they thought the land couldn't be crueler, boom! The weather? Thunder cracked like cannon fire. Rain came in sheets. Hailstorms slammed into the camp with stones the size of fists. On June 27, 1805, while portaging around the Great Falls, a storm hit hard. Hailstones as big as fists battered the crew. The ground turned white, like snow. Men were bruised. Progress stopped. And another time, a flash flood hit fast and without warning. Water roared through camp, nearly sweeping away Sacagawea, her baby, York, and even Clark himself. 1 minute dry, next minute, chaos. Nature didn't care who they were. No mercy, no warning. Chapter 3. Sick, Soaked, and Half Dead. Not only did the frontier try to kill you with its harsh weather, cliffs, and beasts, it came for your insides too. Out there in the wild, getting sick was a miserable ordeal. The Corps of Discovery didn't exactly have doctors. No, they had guesses. Remedies from another age, and a whole lot of hope. Every man knew one wrong cut, one bad cough, one fever that wouldn't break could mean death in the dirt. Medical knowledge back then was more superstition than science. If you were ill, the fix usually made things worse. Bloodletting was a go-to move. Drain you out, hoping your body would rebalance. Laxatives and purgatives handed out like candy. thought to flush bad humors and evil spirits or whatever nonsense passed for medicine. And by the way, if this kind of misery fascinates you, we've got a short episode on the diseases, injuries, and straight-up nightmare ways folks used to die out on the frontier. Lots more survival stories, too. So if you want more of that delightful nightmare fuel, go give it a look. Anyway, Lewis came stocked with a box of cures from Dr. Benjamin Rush, one of the era's top physicians, who still believed that mercury pills were a good idea. His infamous bilious pills, packed with enough mercury to make a thermometer nervous, were nicknamed Rush's Thunderbolts. One dose and you'd be sprinting for the nearest bush if you could stand at all. The Corps swallowed them anyway, because when your stomach's in knots, your chest's on fire, or you've been soaked in cold rain for 2 weeks straight, you'll take anything. And that rain? Oh boy, it didn't stop. Especially at Fort Clatsop, where they spent a miserable winter. Day after day of damp, dripping misery. No sun, no dry clothes, just wet wood, cold air, and the sound of coughing men. And the journals don't sugarcoat it. Weak and sick shows up more than once. Then there were the injuries. If you fall, you bleed. If you trip, you bruise. If you mess up real bad, you pray. On July 4th, 1804, Private Joseph Fields got nailed by a rattlesnake. That hiss came quick, and so did the bite. They slapped some Peruvian bark on the wound, quinine basically, and hoped for the best. Fields lived, but he limped for days. Still, he got up and kept moving, because out there, resting too long could kill you faster than the snake. However, the worst blow came on August 20th, 1804. Sergeant Charles Floyd went down hard. The journals called it bilious colic. His stomach twisted in agony. He weakened fast. Nothing helped. No remedy touched it. He died the next day. One death in over 2 years. Some might call that lucky. But it didn't feel that way when they buried Floyd on a bluff above the Missouri. Truth is, he likely died from a burst appendix. Today, we'd fix that in an afternoon. But back then, it was a death sentence. You see, food was fuel, but not always. Good fuel. The men lived on wild game. Buffalo, deer, elk, whatever they could hunt. Sometimes they ate 9 pounds of meat a day, each. It kept them going, but meat alone doesn't cover everything. No vitamins, no greens, not much balance. Then came the curveballs. When they reached the Waipe Prairie, the Nez Perce welcomed them with camas root, sweet, starchy, and sacred to the tribe. The Corps, used to fat and flesh, wolfed it down. Big mistake. The sudden switch from meat to high-carb root tore through their guts like wildfire. Cramping, nausea. Some doubled over, others couldn't move. Their bodies just weren't built for it, not after months of living like wolves. And the monotony? That wore them down too. Same food, same cold, same wet boots. Over time, it chipped away at their immune systems. Maybe even a brush with scurvy, though nobody wrote it down. Lewis and Clark, nevertheless, did what they could. They leaned on what Jefferson taught them, bled the sick, gave them bark, roots, whatever they could find in the wild. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But they kept going. Every day was a gamble against injury, illness, starvation. And still they pushed forward, deeper into the unknown. Chapter 4: Bears That Don't Die and Other Nightmares. The frontier was alive, and it didn't care if you lived or died. The Corps of Discovery found that out fast. Every mile brought claws, fangs, or venom. Some animals fed them, others tried to kill them. All of them reminded the men they were trespassing. Grizzlies were the worst, not like the black bears back east. These beasts were massive, mean, and almost bulletproof, the kind of thing that made you question your place in the food chain. We actually dug into some of the worst bear encounters in a short episode, 3 savage grizzly attacks from the frontier that'll make your skin crawl. Worth checking out if you're into near-death stories. Anyway, on May 14th, 1805, near what's now Montana, 6 men spotted a grizzly dozing on a sandbar. They hit it with shot after shot, but it kept coming. It charged like a freight train. The men bolted into the river, flailing and scrambling, before someone finally dropped it with a headshot. Lewis later wrote what everyone already knew. These bears were a most tremendous animal. Furthermore, rattlesnakes weren't loud, but they were everywhere, especially in the Great Plains. On May 17th, just days after the bear attack, a prairie rattler nearly got Clark near the Yellowstone. One step slower, and he'd have been dead or twitching in agony. Since then, they learned fast to watch every step, every rock, every patch of tall grass. Then there were the bison, meat on hooves, a walking pantry. But piss went off, and you were getting steamrolled. More than once, a bull would break from the herd and charge, forcing the men to dive, run, or just pray. But it wasn't all blood and bruises. The wild also brought wonder. Creatures no European American had ever laid eyes on. Mule deer with oversized ears, pronghorns that sprinted faster than anything they'd seen, prairie dogs chattering from tunnel cities underfoot. The Corps documented, described, measured, sketched. They were soldiers, yes, but also scientists. And this wilderness was their laboratory. To stay alive, they kept adapting to the circumstances. They posted sentries, traveled in tight groups, changed routes if the land smelled wrong, learned where grizzlies roamed and avoided setting camp there. And when they had to fight, they fought smart, aimed better, shot faster, stayed together. Because out here, a single mistake meant your bones bleaching in the sun. Chapter 5. Gifts, Guns, and Gambling with Tribes. The Corps' survival also depended on people. Strangers, allies, enemies, and no group shaped the expedition more than the native tribes they met along the way. Jefferson had made it clear, Lewis and Clark weren't just there to map rivers and collect plants, they were diplomats too. The West had to know America had arrived. Peacefully, if possible. So, the Corps of Discovery packed peace medals, bright flags, mirrors, beads, hatchets, and cloth, shiny tokens meant to show respect and power. To the tribes, these gifts meant sincerity. To Lewis and Clark, they were leverage, subtle nudges toward trade, treaties, and maybe even farming. It was all a chess game, and the stakes were high. Each tribe was different. Each meeting could change the course of the journey. And when winter hit, they bunked near the Mandan and Hidatsa in what's now North Dakota. These tribes ran the trade game up north. They welcomed the Corps, shared food, and gave them a clearer picture of the unknown lands ahead. For a few months, things were calm. But not every meeting went smooth. September 1704. They crossed paths with the Teton Sioux. That one almost lit the powder keg. The Sioux controlled trade on the Missouri and didn't trust these armed strangers floating through their backyard. Tension snapped tight, words twisted, weapons almost came out. Only quick thinking and carefully chosen gifts kept the peace. Barely. And then there was Sacagawea, young, sharp, Shoshone-born, married to a French-Canadian trader named Charbonneau. She didn't carry a rifle, but as mentioned earlier, she might have been the Corps' most important asset. She spoke Shoshone. She knew Hidatsa. She could read the land and the people. And her presence alone, a woman traveling with a military party, was a walking signal of peace. Clark even wrote it down, Her being there calmed every tribe they met. But she wasn't just a symbol. In August 1805, the expedition hit a wall, the Rocky Mountains. They needed horses. Bad. The only way forward was to cut a deal with the Shoshone. And just like that, fate threw a wild card. Sacagawea's long-lost brother, Kamiawait, was the Shoshone chief. That reunion cracked everything wide open. Suddenly, the Corps wasn't just strangers asking for help. They were family. Horses were traded. Trust was built. If you want the full story on how Sacagawea saved the expedition, check out our full Sacagawea episode. It's nearly 5 hours long, packed with every twist, close call, and hard truth the textbooks leave out. Watch it after this one. You'll see why the Corps might not have made it without her. But in the meantime, the Lewis and Clark expedition kept moving. Chapter 6. Hard Miles, Harder Problems. Out there in the wilderness, every mile was a gamble. The Corps of Discovery kept dragging their lives behind them, day after day, solving problems with determination, guesswork, and pure, stubborn will. The first problem? Food. Always food. They couldn't carry enough for the whole trip, so they hunted like their lives depended on it, because they did. Clark once wrote that they needed 4 deer a day just to keep bellies full. 1 elk, 1 buffalo, every 24 hours. And that was when game was easy to find. But when it wasn't, they boiled roots, slurped watery soup, chewed on scraps. Some days, the only thing standing between them and starvation was a trade with local tribes. Corn, beans, squash, staples that kept them moving. Then there were the maps, or lack of them. Most they had were a joke. Wrong rivers, phantom mountains. So Clark took over. He charted their path himself, compass in one hand, sextant in the other, eye to the sky. He mapped every twist of the river, every ridge, every bend. His maps became lifelines, tools for the future. Still, even Clark's maps needed help. They leaned on native guides, fur traders, whoever knew the land. But even that knowledge had to be double-checked, seen with their own eyes, measured under the stars. Trust, but verify. And sometimes the land just punched back. At the Great Falls of the Missouri, they hit a wall, literally. A roaring river they couldn't pass, so they dragged tons of gear 20 miles over rough ground in scorching heat. It took weeks, nearly killed their horses, nearly killed them. Then came the talking. Or trying to. Neither Lewis nor Clark spoke a word of any native language. They had interpreters like Charbonneau and Sacagawea, but translation wasn't simple. A single message might pass through English, French, Hidatsa, then into Shoshone. 4 languages deep, every sentence like a game of broken telephone. That mess of words led to confusion. Lewis and Clark liked calling tribal leaders children, thinking it showed care. But stripped of context, it might have sounded patronizing, or worse. And when words failed, they signed. Literally. Plains Sign Language was the common tongue across tribes, and one of their men, George Drouillard, was a master at it. His hands spoke when mouths couldn't. Between bad maps, language gaps, empty stomachs, and land that wanted to kill them, it's a wonder any of them made it home. But they did. One step, one trade, one scrape at a time. Chapter 7. Mind Games. 2 years in the wild will mess with your head. No towns, no news, no way back. Just trees, rivers, storms, and silence. The Lewis and Clark crew, dozens of them, marched into the unknown with nothing but courage and orders. And that silence? It grew loud. Out there, they also had to survive the weight in their own minds. day after day, same grind, same meals, same faces. The world extended infinitely in every direction, full of emptiness. No letters, no updates, just guesswork and gut instinct. The journals talk rivers, plants, and latitude, but read between the lines and you'll feel it, the strain, the fatigue, that creeping, bothering pressure that never let up. Inside the Corps, things got tense. Sure, the hardship pulled them close, bonds built in mud, blood, and frostbite. But not everyone got along. There were fights, disobedience, even desertions, different backgrounds, different tongues, different tempers. And when you're stuck with the same group of men for 800 days straight, even the smallest thing can set someone off. Still, they stuck it out, mostly because quitting meant dying. And despite all the friction, they knew the mission mattered more than their egos. And at the top, the load was even heavier. Lewis and Clark didn't carry every decision on their backs. Life and death stuff, every day. A wrong call could get someone killed or sink the whole mission. Lewis especially cracked under that weight. Even Jefferson saw it. He wrote about Lewis's dark moods, and he wasn't wrong. Lewis was sharp but unstable, prone to brooding, impulsive. After the expedition, the ghosts followed him home. Scandals, debts, rumors. By 1809, they devoured him. And so, he took his own life, alone in a Tennessee inn. Clark, on the other hand, held up better. More even-keeled. But that calm, it came from holding everything in. He had to keep the men focused, the mission on track, the whole mess moving forward, whether they were lost, starving, or freezing. There was no room for doubt. And so, the strain of survival either pulled you together or tore you apart. And that's the truth of it. Reaching the Pacific was hard, but staying sane on the way there, that was the real fight. In the end, 2 years, over 8,000 miles, one brutal backbreaking trek into the unknown. The Lewis and Clark expedition was a turning point, a line in the dirt that split old world from new. They went to find what no one else dared to: rivers, roots, tribes, beasts, and lands no American had laid eyes on. And when they came back, they brought more than stories. Clark's maps became game changers. When his charts hit the press in 1810 and again in 1814, they became the go-to guides for anyone chasing the frontier. Folks followed his ink lines all the way into the wild. Until the 1840s, those maps were a gospel. Even more, Lewis and Clark also logged 178 plants and 122 animals no one in the East had even heard of. And their success? It lit a fire. People started believing America was destined to stretch west. That manifest destiny dream got fuel from their footsteps. Lewis and Clark proved it could be done. Men could cross the continent on grit and guts alone. That idea stuck, but it's easy to forget the price. They slogged through storms, scaled cliffs on hands and knees, starved, got chased, got lost, kept going anyway. But they made it, and when they did, they changed the course of a nation.
He stabbed a tiger to death. No gun, no backup, just a knife, a wounded dog, and a body full of adrenaline. James Whitehead wasn't looking for trouble that day, but it came anyway, crashing through the brush with claws, fangs, and 2 years of rage. It ripped his leg open, it nearly killed his dog, and still, somehow, he won. That wasn't the only time, however. This man fought 99 bears, most with nothing but courage, a blade, and a muzzle loader he reloaded slower than death. Every kill fed his family. Every scar told the story. So how did a man from the Tennessee mountains become a ghost forgotten by history? And why does no one know the name of the fiercest bear hunter who ever lived? This is the real story of Tiger Whitehead, a man too wild to tame, too stubborn to quit, and just one bear short of legend. My name is Matthew, and this is Wild America. And now, let's head into the woods. Part 1. Raised by Blood and Bears. Appalachia never lacked for wild men. But even in a land full of tough hides and sharper edges, James Tiger Whitehead stood out. Born in the backwoods of Carter County, Tennessee in 1819, not only did Tiger grow up in the wild, but he belonged to it. His father had been the first to cross the Iron Mountain, climbing up the Carolina side and down into Tennessee, following a cold creek that cut through the ridges like a silver blade. He found a hidden valley beneath Roan Mountain and said it reminded him of Eden. This place had no roads and no neighbors, and no white hunter had ever touched the place. It was full of thick forest, fat game, and silence. Tiger's family settled by a clear stream. There, wild turkeys strutted the ridgelines, panthers screamed at night, bear tracks lined the banks. It was untouched country, and it became home. And as you can imagine, here there was no doctor, no preacher, no law, just what a man could carry and what the land would give. Mail came twice a year, if the river didn't flood. Steel was precious here, and salt was traded like gold. Furthermore, winters were long, so if your roof sagged, you froze, and if your rifle misfired, you starved. Tiger's father, however, was a true frontiersman. He was God-fearing, bone-tough, and quiet as snow. He taught his son the way of the woods, how to track sign and leaf rot, how to read wind, how to work a dog pack like a second heartbeat. To them, the dogs were family. The old hog rifle was religion, and hunting was pure survival. And as you'd expect, money meant nothing to them. The neighbors were ghosts. Yet to the Whiteheads, the forest was heaven on earth. Days stretched long beneath tall chestnut trees and roaring waterfalls. Hunts could last weeks. Tiger learned early how to move through the endless green like a shadow. His blood ran deep with Boone's spirit, self-reliant, fearless, patient. By the time he hit his teens, folks already knew his name. He was a hunter through and through, not some random mountain boy. And bears were just the beginning. Part 2. The Tiger in the Dark. Even among seasoned hunters, Tiger Whitehead went farther. While the old-timers stuck to known trails, he disappeared deeper into the wild, tracking the bears no one else dared follow. By 18, he'd already dropped nearly 20 of them, each kill harder than the last. It was on one of those solo hunts, out in a wide expanse the locals called no man's land, that he saw something he wasn't ready for. The creature didn't belong. Its fur shone strangely, unlike anything he'd seen, striped like shadow and moonlight. At first he thought it was a panther. The mountains had plenty. But this thing moved differently, faster, meaner, smooth as a cat, but strong as a bear mid-charge. He'd gone into the wild many times before, but this was different. No Man's Land wasn't simply a name, it was a warning. There's a reason why locals avoided it. Everyone said it felt wrong. They said things watched you out there. But Tiger didn't care. If anything, that pulled him in deeper. He usually traveled light, just his knife, powder horn, flintlock, a pack of jerky, and his beloved dog Coy. No trail, no markers, just basic killer instinct and grit. They moved through thickets of rhododendron so dense they swallowed the daylight, and wind didn't move here. It waited. By the second day, even Coy was acting strange. Ears always perked, tail low, hackles bristling at empty woods. But then, at night, the dog didn't sleep, and neither did Tiger. He started to lose track of time. The animal they were tracking, if you could call it that, left no scat, no claw marks, just deep, singular paw prints spaced too wide. Clean, calculated. And every time Tiger thought they were closing in, the signs vanished again, like smoke and fog. So it became personal. He stopped thinking about home. He stopped speaking to Coy. The woods became a moving maze. Hollows and ridges repeating like echoes, trees leaning at odd angles, rock faces scored by claws that didn't belong to any beast he knew. By day 3, the silence got into his head. He started hearing breathing that wasn't his, twigs cracking a few feet too far off. Once he turned and thought he saw it, gold fur in the shadows, tail curling behind a stump. When he reached it, nothing. It turned out to be moss and a rusted squirrel trap someone had left decades back. The nights, however, were worse. Dreams bled into wakefulness. He'd jolt up, gripping his knife, heart pounding, convinced he'd been watched. The stars above seemed too bright, too close, like the mountains were shrinking in around him. At one point, Tiger saw boot prints in the mud, human prints, but they only went one way. Now there was no return track. However, Coy refused to follow them. That night, Tiger lay under a dead spruce, half awake, body cold, mind spiraling. He heard something move in the brush behind him, slow, deliberate steps. Then, again, nothing. No attack, no sound, just presence. And that's when he knew. They weren't hunting it anymore. It was hunting them. On the fourth morning, before dawn broke, while everything was still dark, something changed. Then came the smell. Wet fur, rot, musk. Something foreign. Tiger's hand found the rifle. One shot in the barrel. He didn't move. Neither did Coy. Then the growl came. Low, not meant for prey. A sound made to unnerve. Then Coy let out a sound Tiger had never heard from him before. The woods certainly felt off. Quiet. The campfire had burned out. The forest devoured the light. Then, out of nowhere, bam! The creature burst from the trees. No warning, no chance. It slammed into Coy and tore into him, claws deep, tearing flesh. The dog screamed. Tiger couldn't see. It was too dark. He couldn't risk a shot. One mistake and he'd kill his dog. So he did the only thing he could. He pulled his knife and charged. The first stab hit the beast's gut. It roared but didn't drop. Instead, it turned. Its eyes locked on him, wild with fury. Tiger ran, but he didn't make it far. The thing lunged and clamped onto his leg. He went down swinging. Steel flashed. Blood flew. Pain roared through Tiger, but his hand didn't stop. He stabbed again and again. Steel met sinew. Blood sprayed hot across his face. He twisted, kicked, punched, anything to keep it off. Then Coy came back. Wounded, bleeding, half broke, but loyal to the last. He flung himself at the fearless attacker, biting, snapping, dragging it off his master. The beast pinned Coy to the ground. Tiger saw its muscles tense. It was going for the throat. This wasn't panther work. This was something else entirely. However, Tiger didn't wait. He grabbed its shoulders, climbed its back like a downed horse, and with one last surge of fury, drove the knife clean into its throat. The blade sank deep. The beast bucked, staggered, but Tiger held tight. It twisted once, twice, and fell. Dead weight hit the ground. Then, complete silence. Tiger sat in the dirt, soaked in blood, some his, some not. His leg was torn, his hands were shaking, and Coy was whimpering beside him. The sky had started to lighten at the edge. Birds returned to the trees. When dawn finally broke, the beast lay spread out in the clearing. It had a golden pelt, black stripes, ribs like barrel hoops. Its eyes were wide and glassy, its teeth like a bear trap. It had bled out slowly. Tiger had no name for it, only questions and scars. They spent the morning wrapping wounds and catching breath while the sun crept over the ridge. Tiger still had no idea what it was, but he figured the pelt alone could cause a stir at the trading post. And so, weeks after, once they'd both healed up, he and Coy carried the hide down to Bristol. There, word spread fast. It turns out the creature was a tiger, an actual tiger that had escaped a circus over in North Carolina 2 years back. It had been loose in the mountains, slaughtering milk cows and chickens and scaring the hell out of homesteaders. No one could track it, no one could stop it, until Tiger did, with a blade and bare hands. After that, the name stuck. Folks started calling him Tiger Whitehead, and he wore the name like a badge for the rest of his life. Part 3. one bear short of glory. Tiger later married Sally Garland. Afterward, they built a cabin and a grist mill on the same creek his father had once followed down into Tennessee. His legend kept growing. Over time, the bear count climbed, past 40, then 50, then 60. In one of his legendary hunts, the bear was already treed when Tiger and Coy found it. An old male, thick around the shoulders, coat matted from years of fighting. Coy barked from below, circling the trunk, tail rigid. Tiger steadied his rifle. One shot. That's all a muzzle loader gave you. He aimed slow, waiting for the bear to move. Then, fire. Smoke bloomed. Tree wood splintered. Miss. The bear snarled. Not wounded, just angry. It dropped. Right at him. Tiger ran. No time to reload. No room to think. The terrain funneled upward. Tight switchbacks carved into the hillside by deer and weather. He sprinted toward higher ground, boots slipping on moss-slick stone. Coy stayed at his heel, quiet now, the barking gone. Tiger reached a ledge, a rock shelf 10 feet wide, 20 feet up, with nothing behind him but open air and pine tops. The cliff face appeared overhead. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to fall but down. So he turned, but the bear was climbing fast. Guttural grunts, claws slashing through underbrush. Close. Tiger checked his rifle. Useless. No time to reload powder, patch, ball. Then the bear came into view. Close range now. Its jaws were foaming, its breath wet. Its fur was coarse and tangled with burrs. Its eyes were wild, bloodshot, vengeful. Tiger stepped back, heel brushing the ledge's edge. He had seconds. Then instinct took over. He grabbed the rifle by the barrel, flipped it end over end, and as the bear lunged, he jammed the steel muzzle straight into its open mouth. The barrel struck teeth, wedged between jowls. The beast froze, confused, snarling, choking on iron. But Tiger didn't hesitate. He dropped the stock, snatched the belt knife, and drove the blade into the bear's neck, just behind the jaw. The bear bucked sideways, dislodging the barrel, yet it came again, swiping wide. Tiger ducked. One paw missed his face by inches. He felt the air from the swing, and then rolled under the beast, sliced at its gut. Its fur parted, its flesh opened, its blood spilled fast and hot. The bear shrieked, a long, drowning howl. It then reared. Tiger didn't want to take any second chances, so he went low, knife tightening his grip. He stabbed upwards, ribs, liver, lungs, anything soft. The bear slammed a paw into his shoulder, sent him skidding back, but he didn't fall. Not yet. The bear lunged again. This time, Tiger stepped inside the charge and buried the blade into his chest. He twisted hard. The bear finally collapsed, and the ledge fell silent. Tiger's shoulder hurt badly. His coat was half shredded, his vision blurred at the edges, the world still spinning from the fight. He could still hear the bear's breath banging in his ears, even though it was gone. Tiger wiped the knife on the bear's pelt, then looked down at the empty barrel, now bent from the blow. Still, it had done its job. After that, newspapers across the country started calling him the greatest bear hunter in American history. And speaking of brutal bear brawls, this isn't our first rodeo, you know. If you got a taste for survival stories with teeth, we got a whole backwoods buffet waiting. Blood-drenched bear maulings, frost-bitten face-offs, frontier justice gone sideways, you name it. So don't forget to check out all the madness in our other episodes. But while the world turned Tiger into a myth, his mountains started filling with men who didn't deserve them. You see, word of Tiger spread wider and wilder than ever, and with it came outsiders. Hunters from beyond Appalachia started showing up in Carter County, chasing the legend. But they weren't like him. They weren't hunting to eat. They came for the thrill, and they left behind wounded woods, orphaned cubs, empty kills. And Tiger hated it. One day they came home with 2 cubs slung over Tiger's shoulder, small shaken things, barely furred. Their mother had been shot by some greenhorn hunter from out east. Tiger found the cubs yowling beside her cooling body. Tiger couldn't stomach it, so he brought them back, wrapped in his coat. His wife Sally didn't blink. She simply cleared a spot by the fire and took them in like kin. Their own baby was still nursing, barely 3 months old, and so Sally unpinned her bodice, sighed, and offered the cubs the same warmth that had kept their child alive through the freeze. One at a time, they took to her, rooting around clumsily. Despite their small size, they had sharp teeth, cold noses, but Sally winced, adjusted, and bore it like a loving mother would. "Hungry little fools," she mumbled, half to herself. "Ain't your fault." Mornings were long. Wood to split, wash to scrub, stew to stir, a child on one hip, cub on the other, and firewood always running low. She fed the animals, boiled herbs for Tiger's never-ending fever, and still found time to patch the hole in his only good pair of boots. There was no romance to it, no softness, just love and loyalty. When the fawn came, just a week later, its legs trembling, its ribs showing, she didn't think twice. She took it in, fed it cow's milk warmed over coals, and wrapped it in the old wool shawl her mother left behind. Some nights she'd sit by the fire, baby at her breast, one cub asleep in her lap, the other curled beside the fawn on a rag pile. Outside, coyotes howled. Inside, the world held still. Sally never saw herself as kind, just capable. "World's too cold for soft hearts," she once told Tiger, "but that don't mean we let things starve." He'd nodded. That was all. Tiger never left those mountains. He lived and died in Carter County, deep in the same forest that raised him. By the time he'd reached his 80s, he'd taken down 99 bears, not one for sport. Every kill fed his family. Perhaps he was just one short of a number the world would have remembered. And if you ever find yourself on the back roads of Carter County, keep your eyes open for a crooked wooden sign that reads Tiger Creek Road. It's easy to miss, grown over, faded, but it's still there. Follow the stream. It snakes through a narrow valley filled with laurel and stone. Locals call it Tiger Valley, though most don't know why anymore, unfortunately. Tucked at the far end, past an old fence line and a grove of black walnuts, there's a quiet patch of land. No gates, no path, just a hill, a scattering of field stones, and one name that still holds weight: Tiger Whitehead. The headstone is plain, rough cut. The chisel marks still show. It reads, "Here lays the noted hunter James T. Whitehead, born 1819, died 1905, killed 99 bears. We hope he's gone to rest." And next to him lies Sally, his wife, his grit, his compass. Her stone says, "Here lays Sally Garland, not only a mother to the human race, but to all animal kind, as she gave nurse to one fawn and 2 cubs from her breast." No marble angels, no weeping willows, just the wind, the trees, and the silence they both understood. And if there's any fairness left in the world, old Coy's bones aren't far off, buried without a stone, but remembered all the same. He didn't kill for records. He killed to live. And when the killing wasn't needed, he stopped.